Hi everybody. This story came into my email some time ago from, I think, through Amnesty, and I was asked to sign a petition and to write to the Egyptian the president in order to request sparing the life of this man, Father Isaiah, which the title here is Murderer or Scapegoat. And it's about Coptic Bishop Epiphanius was found dead inside his cell in the monastery of St. Macario in Wadi El Natrun, Behira province, Egypt. His skull was fractured and the police immediately concluded he had been killed. Egyptian police learned that two monks, Father Isaiah and Father Phaltius, had quarrelled with Epiphanius in the previous weeks. There had even been talks of Phaltius leading a splinter group outside of the monastery. Isaiah and Phaltius were arrested and committed to trial, and the police claimed Isaiah, whose civil name is Wael Tawadros, had been the killer. Lawyers and relatives of the defendants told NGOs and Bitterwinter that the prosecution was biased from the beginning. One witness, a monk who would testify in favour of Isaiah, died mysteriously in another monastery, perhaps poisoned. Claiming that monks were guilty ruled out other possibilities and favoured a narrative depicting Coptic monasteries as plagued by corruption and even murder. There was ample evidence, Bitterwinter was told, that Isaiah was tortured in jail and compelled to confess. So, looking a bit further into this story, we have the Anglican Inc. here, conspiracy charges raised in Coptic bishop's murder, and this was the man that was murdered, Bishop Epiphanius of Wadi Natrum. And it goes a little bit more into detail, how Arab Muslim Bedouins and the Coptic Pope of the Egyptian Orthodox Church benefited from the sordid ordeal of these two monks who were tried for murder. So it seems that the state was the facilitator of what turns out to be a covert land grab that would otherwise and in any other way sounded an alarm. And the Coptic Church, through that, solidified a provocative faith initiative when the loudest voice against his stance was expunged. Okay, so what was this faith initiative about? Well, Bishop Epiphanius, who was murdered on July 29th, he was what was called a serious thorn in the side of the Egyptian government, and the state wrongfully ignored the bishop's written complaints about desert Bedouins stealing monastery agricultural products, squatting on monastery acreage, and confiscating ancient Christic relics off the land. Since 2013, carrying firearms, the Bedouins gradually displaced the monks and took over their land. Consequently, the monastery lost 1,300 acres by the time Bishop Epiphanius was silenced once and for all last year under mysterious circumstances. And then the article goes on to talk about the two monks who had been sentenced to death for his murder. And it seems within a few days of the murder, a phone call was made from Pope Tawadros II's headquarters in Cairo. This is the Coptic Pope, to a monk in the monastery. According to Dr. Mervat Al-Nama, this monk was instructed to write down on paper the names of the monks told to him during the call, submit it to the police, and indicate that one of these names could be the killer. So they were arrested and tortured by the police, and it seems forced to sign a confession to this murder, which basically, what was going on here is that there was a move to bring the Coptic Church into unity with the Catholic Church. So, the late bishop was opposed to the people's call for orthodox unity with the Catholic Church and aligned himself with the bishop's outspoken rejection of the controversial idea being floated by Pope Tawadros II, the second of Bishop's Epiphanius ideological enemies. Basically, there was a call to bring the Coptic Church into line with the Vatican. So, I'm thinking, all right, the Bedouin. As far as I know, the Bedouin are a people, travelling people. What's going on here? We're talking about Egypt. I think we're talking about the Sinai. Let's have a look a little bit further, see what's going on here. And this article will come up. Sometimes things just take so much time recently with, it seems that as time goes on, the internet gets slower, not faster. So then we can look at the politics of the Bedouin of South Sinai. Now, we all know that Sinai is considered by the Zedekis, or, as they call themselves Zionists, Zionist Israelis, but actually Israel Zedekis, and I'll leave a video link under this to explain why they're Israel Zedekis, which means wrestling against righteousness, and why that is different to wrestling against God, which Israel, actually that's what it means, and it was the name given to Jacob because he wrestled with God in the form, who arrived in the form of a man or an angel, in order to receive a blessing, whereas the Zionists are wrestling with righteous people, righteousness, in order to receive land, wealth and power, which is quite different, quite a different thing from Jacob. So they don't deserve the title Israel, you see. They are Israel Sadakis, you see, because they're battling, they're wrestling against righteousness, not for a blessing, but actually in order to curse people. They're actually wrestling in order to receive a curse, because, the world is cursing them for what they are doing, because we're talking about crime, theft. And, just before we move on to this, I think here I must express congratulations to Abby Martin for standing up to the American establishment that tried to make her sign an agreement that, she's going to be loyal to Israel and she's not going to support the BDS movement, just in order so she could give a talk at a university. And she's battled against them, and the court has ruled in her favour that asking her to sign that was unconstitutional. And well done, Abby Martin, and all the other people that have over the years, challenged this, because it is absolutely disgusting that American citizens are being asked to sign an oath of allegiance to a tyrannical regime such as is operating in Israel and against the Palestinian people. is absolutely abominable. And I'm going to leave the link to this, Abby Martin, and do watch it. And she explains the BDS movement. Now, I've always said, I don't support the BDS movement in terms of sanctions against people. And, I was very pleased to hear Abby explain here about that the BDS movement, it isn't about sanctioning medicines and food and stuff like that, because that is what I am totally against. I believe it's cruel. I believe it punishes the good people, and I know there are many good people in Israel who do not support this Zionist regime, and who do actively do everything they can to help the Palestinian people. So, for me, I would not want to punish those people, and that's why I don't go for, personal boycotts. Though I think that we all should boycott companies that are operating within occupied territories. And I do support the motion that, for example, the Israel Sadeki lobby, so-called Israel Sadeki lobby, is actually kicked out of Parliament, of Britain's Parliament, because they are openly supporting criminals. They've openly declared themselves above the law and even international law and even the sovereign law of every nation, and therefore they constitute a terrorist threat against the people of Britain, because you're talking about a lobby that itself is aligned with a criminal nation that regards itself above the law, above international law, and above the law of every nation. And again, the links to that statement, that statement that came from the Israeli government, okay, is under the video. You'll find the link. You'll find it in links there. Israel declares itself above the law. There's no getting away from that. When somebody has admitted what their intentions are and who they are, I am above the law. I can ignore the international law, and I can violate the law, the sovereign law of any nation. That any representatives of that statement should not be in Britain's Parliament, okay? Other countries, that's up to them what they do. America, that's up to you what you do. If you're quite happy to be governed by a government that is bowing down and swearing oaths of allegiance and signing oaths of allegiance to a tyrannical government of another country that is declaring itself above the law and giving itself rights even to ignore the American Constitution, if you're prepared to tolerate that, well, good luck to you, because you're going to need it. And the same for the people of Britain. You're going to need, look, if you aren't prepared to stand up righteously on behalf of your own laws and your own sovereignty, and that is, I can't compromise on that. Nothing will really achieve. We aren't going to achieve anything until we remove that cancer that is the Israel Zadaki lobby out of Parliament. Okay? Nothing is going to change in Palestine until we, the people, say, no, we will not tolerate to be governed by a government that is beholden to a lawless criminal nation. And, that is the line. The line is drawn. Okay? What has been going on is atrocious. And yes, the only solution now is a two-state solution, and Palestine shall include all the territories that Israel is illegally occupied since 1967, and all of those lands shall be Palestine, and any Jews living in there will become Palestinian citizens under rule of Palestine. Okay? That's the way it is going to be. And what the Israeli people, the true people who can truly be called Israeli people, the righteous people, okay, we need to stand by those people and support them and help them to establish a true democracy in Israel, so that Israel and Palestine can basically be a beacon of light and hope to the world, an example of God's forgiveness, God's unconditional love, God's mercy, God's kindness, and God's law. Okay? So, how does any of that relate to this? Okay? Well, you know, it turns out that the Bedouins, who, you know, I must admit, you know, I do admire them, their tenacity, their strength, the fact that they've held on to their culture, and they are they are generally a very independent people. But unfortunately, they have been infiltrated by Zionists, who it seems have, you know, wherever you find any trouble and corruption, innocent people being attacked in this world, it seems, you know, Israel is going to be behind it somewhere, okay? Even right down to Jeffrey Epstein trafficking children and raping young girls through an organised criminal network. Okay, who do we find there? Oh, Mossad, CIA, you name it. Well, it seems that the Israelis decided to they decided to name the Bedouin as the nomadic children of Israel, okay? And I'll see if I can find the thing. I did have it. I did have it highlighted, but I'll leave you the article. It does explain about how the people of Israel, of how the Bedouin were suddenly, you know, given this status as children of Israel, even though they're Muslims. But I can't see if I just seem to have lost it. Unfortunately. So they were, here we go. To complement the imagery of the Bedouin as Israelite, the Israelis also created the exotic Bedouin. The goal was to export a humanitarian image to the world. They did that through preserving the ecological balance of the desert. Tourism was selectively developed to avoid harming the environment. And it's all about, in order to keep the alluringly nostalgic shanties as relics of Moses' 40 years in the Sinai wilderness. And so they are, in a way, what it is that the Zionists found a way that supporting these Bedouin allowed them to keep control of certain areas of land. And they were using them, you know, to smuggle drugs and things like this. And again, you know, this isn't to cast a slur on all the Bedouin people. We all know that you only need a few rotten apples in a cart of apples, okay, that then contaminate the whole cart. But, you know, the vast majority of the Bedouins do not align themselves with Israel or Zionists. So, you know, I am not promoting that idea. But under cover of Bedouin, as under cover of ISIS, is Israeli, Zadaki, Zionists operate in order to harm Muslim people and Christian people, and in this sense attacking the Coptic Church, which has its own pope separate from the Pope of the Vatican, and in this bid not only to annihilate the Coptic Church, make it a part of the Vatican Roman Catholic Church, but also to steal monastery lands and to challenge Coptic power in Egypt. So, you know, this is, and I was like, of course, the minute I heard about land, the land grab, it was like, yeah. Because whatever land they can grab through the Bedouin, okay, well, at any time, once, you know, they've got that land, and once the Coptic Church has disappeared, it seems that the Egyptian government is just a cardboard cutout bowing down to Israel Zadaki, okay? And then they'll very easily grab the land off the Bedouin. You know, they'll kick the Bedouin off the Sinai, just as they've kicked the Palestinians out of their own lands. They'll do the same to the Bedouin once they've served their useful purpose. The same as America. America is on the brink of civil war, of being completely trashed once it served its purpose of helping Israel. What is it, $21 trillion went missing from the Pentagon, a Pentagon largely controlled by dual Israeli citizens, American Zadaki citizens, okay? $21 trillion has vanished. And, you know, I'll leave you the link. You can watch James Corbett discussing this. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is an actual fact that $21 trillion has gone missing from the Pentagon budget over a period of 21 years. Now, I can't even begin to explain to you what just a few $1 trillion would have bought for the American people. And we're talking 21 trillion. And the American people, you look at yourselves, you look at how much, how far down the line your incomes have dropped. How your living standards are far, far lower than the living standards of previous generations of Americans. That as Israel has grown, Zadaki has grown, American economy, the wealth of individuals American has shrunk exponentially. And America's been infiltrated by this evil that claims itself above the law, because that's what evil is, isn't it? Evil isn't bound by any law. Evil knows no boundaries. Evil will do as it wants, as it wishes. It will use any means to justify if it has to. They're claiming God gave them the right. God gives them the right to live above the law, when God is all about law, okay? Because that is unconditional love, is from a fair and balanced and just law that respects it, because without respect there can be no freedom, okay? And that means respect for each other's individual rights. We are all sovereign in the eyes of the law, in the eyes of God. We are all sovereign people of every nation. So, you know, the Zadakis were using America distributing basic food staples from the American charitable organisation CARE to the heads of every Bedouin family. And that's what they do. Is bribery, blackmail are what the Israel Zadaki Zionists. They're the tools, bribery and blackmail. They make people dependent on them. And it's all about, they then use them, manipulate them to serving their purposes. And as soon as these Bedouins, as soon as Israel has achieved its goal that it wants to achieve through these people, they will throw them away. And exactly as they will do to America, Britain is basically nothing more than a Zionist Israel Zadaki colony right now. Our laws, our constitution, everything, it's basically gone. We are being governed by the same set of criminals, a criminal government that has just recently given itself powers to kill anybody it wants in Britain or abroad, kidnap, torture, rape, murder, even children. There's no exemption for children. They've given, 15 authorities in Britain, right down to the Gambling Commission, the Medical Health Authority, police. Basically, if any of those entities decide that this individual or that group of people are a threat to their economy, to their financial interests, or are they a threat to Britain's national security, which apparently even exposing child abuse comes under a threat to Britain's national security. So it's not looking good. So, they've built schools for them, and but the Bedouins, who expected to be dealt with impersonally, were quite amused with the new perks. Still, while most embraced change, they never let their guard down. In other words, there were no illusions of loyalty. Israel was still seen as an occupying power. But nonetheless, they managed to get a foothold in there. Exactly how they get their little foothold. They got a foothold into Parliament, and since they got a foothold into Parliament, have you noticed that nobody else has a foothold? That actually even charities aren't allowed to lobby Britain's Parliament now. The unions have just vanished virtually. I think, what is it, the Teachers' Union? So, we witness the Israel Zatakis standing behind the Bedouin for their own purpose, for their own evil purpose. The same as in America, they're in America for their own evil purpose. They have been controlling the Pentagon. We've witnessed dual Israeli citizens, American Israeli citizens, at the very highest levels of the Pentagon. And trillions are going missing, just vanishing. What's happened to this money? Nobody can give an account of $21 trillion. What's America's debt? Oh, it is around $21 trillion, isn't it? Is it $22 trillion? America's debt. Virtually identical to the amount of money that's gone missing through the Pentagon. How does that work? How does a nation work and end up $21 trillion in debt? But it can still give billions to these evil people that claim that they're above the law. You see, and that's why they are evil, because they claim they are above the law. You see, that's what makes them dangerous. That's a terrorist. You see, a terrorist says we are above the law. We can violate the sovereign law of any nation. We are not beholden to international law. You see, if the Jewish people are God's chosen people, okay, as God's chosen people, they would be the most law-abiding, caring, compassionate, kindest people on earth. the Palestinians would have been celebrating, you see, because they would have made life so lovely for everybody. And Jesus, as the epitome of God's representative, who most perfectly translates the light into human understanding of who God is and what God is really all about, is from Jesus, a Jewish prophet, a Judaic prophet, because there was nothing Jewish about Jesus. Jesus is a true Jew. You see, there's nothing ish about him. And so what Jesus taught about loving thy neighbour, respecting people, forgiveness, kindness, compassion, and also standing up righteously, you see, because there was another very interesting article here, which I'm going to leave the link to it, Ploughshares into Swords, the Lost Biblical Ideal of Peace. A very, very interesting article by David Hasney here. And he explains and gives evidence after evidence that peace in the Bible actually does not refer to no war. Peace actually refers to well-being, usually referring to health or prosperity of an individual or of a nation. So peace is about well-being. Okay, so if a nation is not healthy, is not content in the sense of they have health and prosperity and abundance, then there is no peace. That nation is not at peace. So, you know, Africa could not be described as a peaceful nation at the moment because the health and prosperity of people in general is very much degenerated because of lawless individuals who believe they can override God's law and Jesus and just steal whatever they can and leave people in poverty and claim Africa one of the most wealthiest, resource-rich nations on earth. Africa, oh, apparently it's a poor country. It's a very poor country. But it isn't. Africa's a very rich country, but the people aren't allowed to benefit from their own nation's wealth because it's been robbed by colonisers. And that's what these alleged Zionists are. They are colonisers. And they will infiltrate tribes and they will pit one tribe against another in order to defeat any movement that threatens the corporate grip. And the corporate grip right now is serving the alleged Zionists. They call themselves Zionists. They're not Zionists. Okay. They oppose Zion. They oppose Zion. They oppose Judaism. They thrive on the oppression and persecution of Jews. That's where they got their power and their wealth. Begging, going around the world, begging with their begging bowl for over 100 years. Oh, look what's happening in Russia to Jewish people. Give us some money. Oh, look what's happening to Jewish people in Poland. Give us some money. Look what's happened to Jewish people in Germany. Give us some money. Oh, give us Palestine. We need a state. Look what Hitler has done to the Jewish people. We need our own state. Now let us go and do that exact same thing that Hitler was doing. Let's go and do it to the people of Palestine because we have a right to do that because it was done to us. I mean, none of it makes any bloody sense. And the vast majority of Jews outside of Israel Zadake, which it shall never be called Israel until the true Jews are governing that nation. The true representatives of God who, like Jesus, live with care, kindness, respect and compassion. and don't want to build an apartheid state. So, you know, when Israel says, yes, we're signing a peace treaty, a peace can actually mean war, okay? That they shall not be at peace unless there is war. Because for them, there is no peace while ever Palestinians still occupy their own lands of Palestine. Until those Palestinians have gone, then there is no peace for these so-called alleged Zionists. You know, as I've repeated, real Zionists are Rastafarian. They are real Zionists. These people, mostly from Europe, I think a vast majority Eastern Europe, okay, is where they actually originate. These people are not Zionists. They do not understand Zion. They do not understand the prophecies. They do not understand Isaiah. They have no correct interpretation. Their interpretation is corrupt. It's criminal. It's the wrong interpretation. And they will end up destroying themselves. The only thing that we can do, you know, is not to attack these people, but to stand up for the people who they are attacking, and to stand up and to stand by the people who are struggling righteously to live according to the law, to establish a democracy. So, you know, the true Jews and the Christian people and the Muslim people who are now living in Israel Zadaki, the land controlled by Israel Zadakis, calling themselves Jewish Zionists. But the fact is that anybody can be a Zionist. You know, was it Joe Biden's father said to him, oh, well, you don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist. In which case, you know, Biden referred to himself, oh, well, I'm a Zionist then. As David Cameron, an alleged Christian, has stated he is a Zionist. As Boris Johnson is a Zionist. You see, because Zionism has got nothing really, has got absolutely nothing to do with Judaism in the sense of what these people are about who are calling themselves Zionists. What they're about is eugenics. What they're about is a Nazi philosophy, the same Nazi philosophy that gave them Israel, that shed Jewish blood, Judaic blood, that shed Judaic blood, and then they, which, you know, you look behind the scenes and you'll find Zionist money, Zionist influence behind the establishment of Hitler and the Nazis and their war machine. You'll find Zionist profits being made there. Israel Zadeki profits being made there. Them same Israel Zadekis who then claim rights to Israel on the grounds of the Bible. And apparently the whole world's going to support them. You know, they have a right to defend themselves, which actually an attacker cannot claim a right to defend themselves. An attacker may be forced to defend themselves from the righteous reply of the victim of their attack. And if the victim cannot reply, then the victim is a victim and not a survivor. The victim won't survive because repeated attacks are going to destroy every single Palestinian life. So, you know, Israel under Solomon was the Bible's paradigm of national peace, as God tells David explicitly for telling Solomon's life, behold, a son shall be born to you, and I shall give him relief from all his enemies around, for his name will be Solomon. Shlomo, a cognate of Shalom, and peace and solace I shall bestow upon Israel in his days. And the elements of this paradigm are clear. military supremacy, reputation and wealth coupled with outstanding religious and cultural achievements. That's what peace means. So according to these alleged Zionists, the idea of peace as an all-encompassing national well-being reappears in the book of Haggai, a prophet who witnessed the return of the Jews to the land of Israel after decades in exile. Haggai delivered to the Judean governor Zerubbabel a vision that was to guide the leadership of the new Jewish state, a vision of national peace that included strength, wealth and honour. See, well, you know, we have moved on. We're not living as people lived thousands of years ago. We have learned a lot over the last few thousand years. Jesus has arrived and taught us the true way and taught us the truth about, you know, reincarnation, for example. What kind of world we leave behind, what kind of mess we ignore in our lives is exactly the mess and the world that we will be returning to. And even if you don't believe in reincarnation, if just simply you love the children that we leave behind and we want to leave them with a better world, an improved world, that we improve. But we're not. We're leaving the children a polluted world, a corrupt world, a criminal world. And, you know, I stand by the Muslims, I stand by the Bedouins, I stand by the Christians. Okay, all righteous people. I don't care what colour, what creed they are. Nothing I'm saying here is against any one faith or class. But I am condemning any people, any organisation that would stand with a group of people who claim they are above the law and are entitled to violate the laws, the sovereign laws of any nation. I am naturally against those people because I will stand by the rights of the people who have established their own sovereign laws. I will stand by the rights of the people to be protected and benefit from international law. And there should be peace. You see, the law is peace. Wherever the law is operating, that is peace. I'm not talking about, you know, antiquated laws such as Sharia law and, you know, antiquated Judaic law or antiquated British law. I'm talking about laws of the 21st century as have been evolved through time. Okay? The law of the people, the law of human rights. And, you know, I mean, I understand Islam and I understand, you know, people say, oh, well, you know, Sharia law was created by Islam. Well, Sharia law was not created by Islam. Sharia law was common throughout the Middle East before Islam. These are facts. There's no escaping it. Okay? What Islam did was introduce forgiveness into Sharia law and compensation, so that the victims of crime have a legal right to forgive and even perhaps to help the person that's offended them, to take everything into account, to show consideration. You see, that is what a court exists for, to be like God, to take everything into account when assessing the level of crime and what should be the consequences. And I think we need as a species to get out of this idea that we can deal with crime by inflicting punishment. I think we have to recognise that actually there's something wrong somewhere. If people are being forced to steal, are they stealing out of pure greed and a maligned sense of superiority, as with the Izrat Sadakis, calling themselves Zionists, which is actually evil, in which case they need to be arrested, incarcerated, and, be given some form of therapy to help them align with reality, that no, you're not superior. You do not have a right to ignore the sovereign laws of every people. And yes, that will feel like a punishment to those people because they want to be able to, carry on with their criminal activities. That they consider they have a right to commit these crimes, you see, which is absolutely ludicrous. It's a sign of insanity. We need to accept that. And while ever we are accepting, Britain, for example, is accepting the Izrat Zadaki lobby, and so is America. And we've got our politicians all trotting across to Izrat Zadaki, turning a blind eye to what the horror of what is been going on for over 70 years. Nothing's going to change ever. And yes, it's good that people came out and marched on for Palestine recently in their thousands and millions throughout the world. It is good. It shows something. But those marches aren't there every single day, are they? What are we, the people, doing in each of our own nations to thwart the progress of the Izrat Zadaki mob that has a foothold and a grip over our politicians and in our parliaments, that is slowly eroding our democracy? That they come in, they use Britain, until eventually when they're done with us, oh well, we'll just annihilate them now. We'll just strip them of the rights. We'll stick in this government that'll just lie to them and rob them and strip them of all their human rights. We all need to take a good look at Jeffrey Epstein and understand the significance and importance of that case and the implications of the CIA being involved and Mossad and the levels of leverage around this world over governments, politicians, financiers, lawmakers, you name it. Bill Gates himself has told his wife, who's now divorcing him, that, the reason he was hanging around Epstein was because he thought Epstein would help him to get a Nobel Peace Prize. Because apparently Epstein was very close to one of the people, leading figures in deciding who gets a Nobel Peace Prize. And it's like, hold on a minute. So are you telling me that? So how is it that a child trafficker, child rapist, organised criminal actually participating and controlling organised crimes against children, which does, under international law, constitute crimes against humanity? Okay, so a man who was found guilty of crimes against humanity, even then Bill Gates was still hanging around this guy. He was hanging around him well before he was convicted and after, because he thought, apparently he was going to get a Nobel Peace Prize because this guy has so much power that he's even got the person, one of the lead people handing out Nobel Peace Prizes. He's got that guy in his back pocket. That should tell us a lot about the kind of world we're living in and what dangers we are in right now, to listen to even a word they are telling us. When we're looking at all this COVID-19 stuff and vaccinations and anybody asking questions, are being shut down, losing their YouTube accounts, losing their Patreon accounts, because they're sharing scientific studies, like, for example, The Last American Vagabond, sharing scientific studies that do raise serious questions about the narratives around vaccines and what have you, vaccines and masks and things. But he's being shut down. And we look at Israt Sadaqi, okay, and you see what they're doing there. Oh, they're going to be the leaders of the world in this, rolling out the vaccine passports, blah blah blah. They can't wait to implement it. Oh, and then we've got the other side of the narrative of like, oh, how Israel's denying the poor Palestinians of getting vaccinations. Excuse me. Israel's been denying Palestinians the right to go and receive cancer treatment for how long? Oh, but we're all seriously worried now and concerned for Palestinians because they can't participate in the mass Bill Gates experimental gene editing technology. Of course, the Palestinians should be allowed to be experimented on. You know, what's going to happen next? Are they going to have such control over people that people will be marching down the streets in order that Palestinians can participate in the same dangerous medical experiments as Israel and all their cronies are now advocating for every single individual on earth? And how dare they do that? So, you know, humanity is a species that is sleepwalking into oblivion. We all need to start celebrating our differences as a diverse species, as God created us, and standing with each other, with the righteous, instead of battling against the criminals. We stand with the righteous and empower them and watch the criminals crumble. Watch the criminals destroy each other. They will destroy each other. We don't need to destroy them, but we can close our doors on them. We can close the door of Parliament on the Israt Sadaqi lobby. And we can pray for the victims of crime. We can pray for the victims of crime. Innocent people. This man was murdered on the 21st of May. He was executed. He was tortured. An innocent man caught up as a scapegoat in the games of the Israt Sadaqis operating in the Sinai of Egypt, manipulating, using their influences of blackmail and bribery. Innocent people dead. Victims of brutality. Now, can't say for sure that the Zionists are around it, but you know, their fingerprints are on the scene of the crime, aren't they? The same as with 9/11. The same as with 7/7. You know, the facts of 9/11 are not a conspiracy theory. We're looking at a conspiracy fact. It's the official 9/11 report that's a conspiracy theory, a theory that has been blasted to oblivion by the architects and engineers and families of the victims of 9/11 who paid for private studies that prove conclusively, top university studies that prove conclusively those buildings were brought down by controlled demolition explosives. So that means there was foreknowledge, there was planning, and it had to involve insiders within America's own military and authorities and intelligence agencies. And who might they be? Who were the people who were stopped driving around America with lorries of a plane flying into Twin Towers on 9/11? Who was dancing and had been, as the towers came down, dancing and rejoicing and filming as the towers were being brought down, claiming they were there to record the event? An event that was apparently a surprise attack. It was such a surprise, wasn't it? You know, that days before, people were suddenly hedging bets against American Airlines. There comes a time when we just have to face reality. Face reality, people. Because I tell you now, what's happening in Palestine is happening in every nation. It's just that a lot of people can't see it yet. They flash the COVID cards in front of everybody's eyes and everybody's suddenly worried about the person standing next to them in a queue. There comes a time when we have to stand together and look out for each other and look out for our children, to stand up for the law of our land. And if we're not going to do it, the next generation aren't going to have a chance. Look at what's happened to the Palestinian people, robbed of their lands, robbed of their rights, robbed of their homes, robbed even of their rights to defend themselves. Is that the future that we're going to give to the children of our planet? A planet where Bill Gates owns virtually every single acre of farmland in America. He now owns 250,000 acres of farmland, one man, in America. A man who's a eugenicist, a man who's a Zionist, a man who wants to feed people genetically engineered food. A crazy madman who hangs around with a child rapist and who organised these crimes against children, ran a criminal syndicate operating in bribery and blackmail. You are stupid people who cannot wake up to reality right now. You are stupid people who will turn around and say, oh, you know, this video's too long, I can't listen to all this. And it's like, well, don't listen to it then, just live it. Live it, eat it, drink it, breathe it, shit it out and leave it for your children and see how worse it is for them. And shame on anybody, actually, who is even slightly aware of what's going on and hasn't looked further, who isn't prepared to at least support the people who are speaking out. The righteous shall inherit the earth. Because the righteous are meek, you see. Part of being righteous is to be a meek person. That, no, we don't go out and commit terrorist attacks, do we? We stand up righteously. So I'm going to leave it there. Love and God bless to everybody, and stay strong and keep the faith.